Izzy Johnson's reflective journals for Performing Arts Level 3 aka Dance from Monday the 23rd of November to Thursday the 26th of November. In Monday's lesson, we decided that it was time for us to film Act 2, and this was because Act 2 was the act that was mostly finished and polished and that we felt really confident to perform. We also looked at incorporating outfits and costumes and makeup to this process so that we could really get into character and get into the time period. So the costumes that we had for the women were pearl necklaces, headbands with a feather on top, and then for the actual costume was just black cycling shorts and either strappy vest top or a t-shirt in my case, because I felt uncomfortable in a vest top as I didn't really feel comfortable dancing in it, and decided to go with a t-shirt that was tied at the back to make me still have some form of figure and keep the illusion of having a figure there. In that lesson we spent the first half of our day just going over the dance in our costumes, making sure that we had no kind of problems, and just make sure that everything that we were wearing was comfortable, and that if anything wasn't, then that could be adjusted over time as we started to put everything else together, that we could look at how our costumes were going to fit in with everything else. These costumes for Act 2, we had pearls and headbands for the Charleston part section of Act 2, as we had the rave, the Charleston, and then the rave number 2, and in that final rave, that's where Aurora gets drugged and she falls under Mara's spell. The audience will see this because obviously in the first rave we have big black hoods that we put our hoods on, and we're all very dark, mysterious figures. And obviously with the traditional feather in our hair for the Charleston and the big pearls where we tie a knot in them, it makes it look very 1920s-ish, kind of speakeasies with flapper girls, so it just kind of sells everything a bit better. And we obviously research 1920s attire, 1920s dance styles. Obviously the Charleston we introduced really early on, and some of the feedback was that we really, once we got into character and we kind of started to look at our hair, our makeup, our actual attire that we wear in different props, we began to get into character more, and as we were performing it and being filmed, we saw a major difference in our performance skills, and it really enhanced how we dance, how our facial expressions are. It really made us come into our own. Some of the problems that we faced, well, from my end anyway, the necklaces, so the big pearl necklaces, as we were dancing and as we were taking our jackets off and jumping and stuff, because there's a lot of high energy movements in the Charleston section of the rave, of section 2, I felt that because I was wearing glasses, because I can't see without them on, the pearls were hitting my face as I was jumping, and they were hitting my glasses, causing me to lose focus. They were jumping everywhere, making me lose focus, and the headbands were extremely uncomfortable, and when trying to take them off, they pulled my hair out. So I think that we might need to look at how we can get around that, maybe taping down the pearls or safety pinning down the pearls to our t-shirt or whatever. But then again, we also come with the problem of how we're going to take them off if we safety pin them, because that might take a while. But our action plan now is just to keep on refining and rehearsing, maybe even with outfits on, just because we don't want to lose what we already have, and we don't want to lose the focus of what we already have. On Tuesday the 24th of November, we looked at, the first part of our lesson, we looked at a group called Frantic Assembly, who are more of a drama group but use lots of physical interaction with each other. And we looked at one of the methods that they use, which is using touch on yourselves to connect with yourselves better. And there were 3 individual blocks to this. So the first one was just coming up with 9 simple movements that kind of connected with each other, and maybe remembering the touch of a friend, of a family member. And we weren't meant to put any emotion to it, but it did come out as quite an emotional task. The second block that we looked at was changing our focus to different areas. So if I were to put my hand on my shoulder, maybe I'd look to my shoulder or turn to the shoulder that was being touched. And then the third block was to have a partner connect. As we were going through with our 9 different connections on our body, our partner would kind of connect to one of those connections and move with it and then come away from it. So that was the first part that we did. This was really interesting because whilst we weren't meant to put emotion to it, it did kind of instantly put you in an emotional state. I know it put me in one because it just made me remember different touches of different family members that I miss. And obviously through COVID, we're not really meant to be touching each other. So it made you miss that kind of interaction with humans that we were all so used to having up until now. And then the second part of our lesson, we moved into the theatre and were paired together and asked to use what we learnt from Frantic Assembly and that kind of workshop task and put it into a duet on a chair that incorporated both of us and kept that element of touch and really put us 2 together and made us look as one. And this task was kind of challenging because it was difficult to come up with movements with a partner that made them feel comfortable and made me feel comfortable. Because, it was a weird task, but I can see why we had done it. Because, obviously, in 2020, we're not meant to be touching people as of COVID because we need to keep ourselves safe. So we used this for section 3 in the beginning when Aurora is being woken up from being in the hospital. Because obviously we were allowed to touch and now we're not. So we were showing how our relationships were close and then they weren't and then they were close. And we also had a really good idea for Prince, Libby's character. We had an idea for Prince that if he was sat on the other side of the hospital, maybe dating other people, trying to get over the loss of Aurora and her being asleep for all this time, and how we could have 4 individuals repeating the same part of a motif and then creating another part to show that kind of diversity of the people that Prince has met. But obviously none of them can compare to Aurora and his love for Aurora. And then in the hospital scene, where Aurora's being woken up, we can see her very heavy movements but still connecting with other people. And some of the difficulties with this was obviously with COVID, I didn't really want to touch anyone, but I thought I might as well because, to get the task done and to make it look effective. But that was my only problem, and I got over that quite easily once, we'd all sanitised our hands, we'd all taken the right precautions. And yeah, it didn't really bother me as much as I thought it was going to. So now we just needed to look at how we were going to refine this and put that into Act 3 and how that was then going to lead into Prince and Aurora, aka Libby and Maya's part, and how everything was going to fit into each other. On Wednesday the 25th of November, it was quite a short lesson, but we did get quite a lot done. So on Wednesday, we looked at our transition from Act 2 to Act 3 to show how long Aurora's been sleeping for, obviously 100 years. We looked at the transition through the ages, and we looked at refining what we already had, rehearsing it, maybe adding even more characteristics to it. And we also looked at the 1920 section, because obviously Act 2 ends in 1920, but the track that we're using has music from the 1920s, so we didn't just want to cut it out, we wanted to add even more choreography. So we looked at doing that in unison, and we all we were getting it, but because it was so fast, I think that we just need to rehearse, practice and refine that. And then, we also discussed how we can improve our performance in this, because we all have different eras and we all need to be a bit more, happy and peppy and really relate to our era. Then me and my friend Libby were tasked with choreographing the 2020 section or the early 2010s section and creating content for that. And then we taught that to the rest of our peers, the rest of our friends, and that proved challenging because whilst we thought the movements were easy, obviously there are a lot of different dancers who have lots of different styles, and so we took our time with that, with not only just teaching it but choreographing it ourselves and learning it ourselves, because it was a difficult piece of choreography, but once we got it down, obviously we found it easy because we created it. And towards the end of the lesson, we ended up performing this in front of a small gathering of people who were just around. And some of the feedback that we got back from that was that some people's energy levels were higher than others, and some people's facial expression and performance skills. So I think that once we've got in costume and we get costume sorted for that bit, that it might make people feel a little bit more at home or comfortable per se in performing this, because we're so concerned with the Sleeping Beauty aspect that we find it difficult to break away from Sleeping Beauty and the styles that we've done in Sleeping Beauty. So I think that going forward we just need to keep on practicing, rehearsing our different parts with our partners, because we were putting partners for certain bits of it. And then also just re-look at the 1920s bit, because whilst it was fast, it was difficult to learn. So if we just keep on looking at that and looking over that, then I think that will, help us further on and help us get it down. On Thursday, the 26th of November, the first part of our lesson was mainly focused on looking at Act 1, refining Act 1 and the 3 different sections in Act 1, aka the entrance of the fairies, the introduction to all of the different individual fairies, and the 2 duchesses, myself and Grace, and then looking at Mara's entrance and how she curses the baby Aurora. This proved to be an easy yet very drawn out task, if you'd like, because we had so many different characters. We had Count Lilac, all the different fairies, and obviously Mara and the 2 duchesses. The entrance of the fairies and the introduction to everyone was easy. It was just us looking at Mara's entrance. So we had to refine all of Mara's choreography, aka Leah, and then we had to look at how the duchesses and the fairies would react to Mara's entrance, and me being the more protective queen out of me and Grace, looking at how I would protect Grace and protect the baby Aurora. And this proved to be difficult because, coming up with all new material is always a struggle, but we ended up getting it down anyway. And I think if we just add costume to it, then we should be fine, because I think the only thing that is missing from this now is costume, because costume brings the performance to life in a sense and helps everybody come together and look the part, especially. Then in the second part of the lesson, we just looked at Act 3 and really refining Act 3 and going through the story of Act 3. And we've decided that Prince and Aurora are going to get married after they re-meet each other, after they find each other again. And we came up with a really cool idea of having us just walking through. And because Aurora and Prince both use umbrellas in their duet that they do, we had the good idea of me and Leah walking together with an umbrella, and then Holly walking with an umbrella, and then just as they're about to start their duet, we pass them the umbrella as we're walking through. So we're using pedestrian movements and gestures to help make everything look more normal in 2020, so obviously social distance, but we also have people walking in couples, we have people walking alone, and then we looked at how from their duet we'd all move into unison and how we'd make the wedding scene look. And this proved to be a bit difficult, but then we decided there's no point in creating new material, but perhaps recycling material that we'd used from Act 1, Act 2, and maybe even the transitions. And then we used unison and canon to put everything together, and we used still images, and this just helped to put everything together for Act 3, and we'd basically got everything done in that day. So we'd got Act 1 covered and Act 3, and those were the main parts that we were struggling with and that we'd struggled to make content for because we just didn't talk about the story enough. So I think now we just have to get into costume, get costumes sorted, reevaluate our characters and just rehearse everything and make sure that everything is refined and that everything is polished and perfect, and then hopefully we can be ready to do either a performance or film them and then put them together.